We welcome you to 4th day of our Sustainable Development Conference. I welcome you all and my esteemed panelists in session Women's Vulnerability in Recent Pandemic Lessons from South Asia. And today's panelists are Dr. Ali Kamam, Chief SDGs Ministry of Planning and Special Initiative Government of Pakistan, Dr. Shaheen Ashraf from World Food Program Pakistan, Miss Ayesha Nazuk from Nashia University. We have with us Dr. Mohsin Kazmi, Associate Research Fellow at SDPI, Dr. Shahla Tabassum, Head of Gender of Department at Fatma Jinnah Women University, and we have with us Miss Saeeda Khan, University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. Before I begin, I have few housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded and would be available at our website. If you have any questions from presenters, please use the chat box on Zoom. Each presenter will have 10 minutes to present their presentation, and if you have experienced any issue being hearing today's session on Zoom, you can also join us on YouTube and Facebook, and you can also use our hashtag SDC2021 on Twitter. So before I begin, I request to Dr. Ali Kamal for their opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sadia, and thanks for having me. Especially at the panel, which is very close to my heart because COVID-19 is one of the pandemics which has shut down the whole world, and just not shut down the whole world because of the health issues. It shut down the overall economies of the entire world. And we had the Great Depression in 1929, and we had 2007-8 global financial crisis, and there were certain crises which are Mexico crisis or East Asian crisis. But in those crises, we have this sector mostly, and the people who are laid off belongs to industrial sector. But this time, the entire services sector have been targeted by the pandemic, and most of the services sector, or we call otherwise we call it informal sector, other than the services sector, which are which include small scale manufacturing or small scale industries where women workers are in large numbers. For example, home-based workers, there are lots of women, females who are working as a home-based industry, have the home-based industries, whether it's related to garments or a small things which they are making at the homes. So even the females who are going to schools, they are the most vulnerable group because we have a problem of access to schooling, especially the pandemic hit globally, and especially the developing countries, and especially in the South Asia and Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka. I was in Sri Lanka and we were discussing the same issues on the Sustainable Development Goals, and teachers, they were the most vulnerable group, whether they will come back to those jobs or not. So love to listen to all the panelists on the findings of the research papers or research reports or the literature review, whatever they have done on the pandemic and women vulnerabilities, especially associated with the females. So over to you, Sadia. Your mic is mute. Unmute, Sadia.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali Kamal, for your opening remarks. And
now you're good.
Thank you so much. Now, please allow me to welcome our first presenter, Dr. Shaheen Ashraf. Dr. Shaheen is leading gender protection and disability portfolio at the United Nations World Food Program across Pakistan. Earlier, Dr. Shaheen served as visiting research fellow at University of Western Australia and Loughborough University, UK. Her research and publication interests include rural development, women and gender rights, gender balance, gender-based violence, equity and inclusion issues, and women economic empowerment. She's in PhD in women and gender studies. Today, she will be presenting her study on gender responsive intersectional approaches in the context of pandemic. Sorry, in the context of pandemic. So, over to you, Dr. Shaheen.
Thank you very much, Sadia. May I kindly request you to play the video before I share my screen?
Sure.
And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
हमें भी बहुत मुश्किलात पेश आई क्योंकि हमारे हमसे बंदे खाने पीने का भी मसला था, किराए का भी मसला था। हमें माशरे चीज़ की इजाज़त नहीं थी ना घर वाले थे।
We're committed to addressing vulnerability, and particularly when it comes to people's ability to access food and nutrition. We're making sure that people have what's required for them to survive and to thrive, and to capitalize on their unique capabilities to contribute to society.
Thank you very much, Sadia. Let me share my screen with you all. Please let me know when it is visible to you.
Yes, Dr. Shaheen, your screen is shared with us. You can start now.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Chair of the session, Kemal Shah, my special thanks to SDPI for allowing us and giving us an opportunity to present various kind of research which has been done in Pakistan, especially on gender. So before I start my presentation here, I would like to share some of the important work which has been done by the Pakistan Country Office. Since 1968, WFP, World Food Programme, is present in Pakistan, and it has national office in Islamabad and provincial offices in Muzaffarabad, Peshawar, Quetta, Lahore, and Karachi. As you see here, that WFP Pakistan Country Office strategic plan based on 5 actually strategic objectives. It works in Pakistan also encompasses community resilience building, disaster risk management, and preparedness elements for sustainability and national ownership. Alongside the provision of critically needed relief and nutrition support to vulnerable population groups, WFP also provides technical support to the government by conducting research to generate evidence to guide policymakers. The major achievement that was made in 2020 during pandemic was initiation of the Assassination Program. Perhaps many of you know already, which is nutrition support interventions for pregnant women and children under 2 years of age. And this program is implemented in collaboration with the government of Pakistan's Asas umbrella program. And efforts were made to deliver the response indeed throughout the year during pandemic in a very gender-sensitive manner with respect, dignity, and great focus on women empowerment. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so this study was carried out in 2020, especially during pandemic, and this study examines United Nations World Food Programme's humanitarian and development response in Pakistan that employs the intersectional approaches as a core gender and human rights lens to enable the most vulnerable groups, especially women, people with disability, and transgender, you just saw the video, and others to protect themselves from the worst effect of COVID-19. And this study illustrates an interesting example of the value added of the intersectionality in the times of crisis within the domain of education, social protection, nutrition, and other. These are the various domains in which WFP actually operates. However, the findings are still relevant to many other contexts. This study is based on actually gender review and analysis of community response, focus group discussions, key informant interviews with beneficiaries, women, persons with disabilities, and others. And finally, this study proposes workable solution based on first-hand field-based data gathering and analysis. So before I present findings, let me share with you that for this particular study, we use the concept of intersectionality, and we also understand that this concept of intersectionality is not new in the development context. However, it's used in pandemic like COVID-19, especially when funding and other economic resources are shrinking, require us to be more cautious in making strategic efforts that leave no one behind at least. So for this particular study, the use of intersectional approaches that recognize that people will have different identities, needs, priorities, capacity, which are not stated. And by this, I mean that it offers a way to understand and respond to the ways different factors such as age, gender, disability, ethnicity, intersection, sectionality intersect to shape individual identities. And this approach highlights that the specific target population is itself a combination of many different identities. The concept has been applied in many contexts. So
Dr. Shaheen, your screen is not moving. If you can just put it on the slide mode.
It is on a slide mode.
Full screen, do it full screen because only title is there.
Okay, I'm on a, okay.
Thank you.
Are you able to see it now?
No. If you can do it, just restart your slide share, your screen once again, and then it will be moving on.
Okay, let me try again.
Yes, now it is. Now it's okay. Thank you.
It is. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you see it now? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, please.
Okay, in 2020, WFP Pakistan made a strategic shift from status-based to vulnerability-based assistance while applying intersectional approaches. And here I would like to share findings based on some experiences made by WFP that show particular vulnerable groups, how they have been affected and how they have been benefited by various interventions. So let's have a look at the women and girls first. So it seems that addressing vulnerability based on gender greatly supported WFP to target women, while recognizing women's empowerment as means to achieving gender equality. WFP itself actively embedded gender equality measures to promote the role of women in the design, implementation, and management of activities. And you can see here that overall, out of 2 million beneficiaries assisted by WFP, 55% were women. And through its livelihood support program, around 0.2 million people benefited, and out of which 42% were actually women. The most interesting was to notice that despite difficulties, especially during COVID, to greater extent, we succeeded to reach the most difficult areas and promote gender equality. That was Balochistan and KP. However, for some of the programs, specific arrangements were made to respond to COVID emergency, especially school education meal program. Initially, it was under this program, actually WFP extended cash assistance to around 21,000 girls or secondary students. And initially, it was decided that transfers will be made conditional, but due to COVID, unconditional transfers were made to all the schoolgirls, especially in the KP. And another group that was benefited were people with disabilities. And persons with disabilities also face an increased risk of exclusion, we know already. And it has been learned through this study that segregated data at the minimum by sex, age, and disability allows deeper understanding to assess the population. And to target persons with disabilities, WFP uses Washington Group questions, which is a recommended tool for disaggregated data by disability. So Washington Group questions consist of actually various questions, which has 4 answers categories. The question or domain relate to the basic function like seeing, hearing, walking, mobility, cognition, communication, and self-care. Any person answering a lot of difficulty or cannot do at all, at least one domain, is considered to be positively defined by the Washington-based question for disability. So the third group that was benefited was transgender, as you also recently watched in the video, that socially excluded group, which is usually, we call them Khwaja Sara in Pakistan, is considered outcast. The livelihood of transgender people has been disproportionately affected by the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. As such, no social safety net program considered this particular group. So WFP provided unconditional cash transfer assistance around 7,500 for 6 months during the pandemic to extremely vulnerable groups, and community members were identified with the help of local NGO and engaging local administration and extensive targeting vulnerability assessment following. To reach this group, WFP made specific mayors in a sense that this program should be delivered to them with dignity and with a lot of respect. And this case also highlights that intersectionality approaches need to be more context specific and may require specific mayors to engage with particular vulnerable group. Another group that was also benefited due to intersectionality approaches applied by One Food Program, internally displaced people. And in Pakistan, we know that over 1.2 million people have been displaced. And since 2008, One Food Program, in collaboration with the government of Pakistan and other donors, has been supporting displaced population by providing food assistance. But recently, comprehensive assessment was carried out, covering all districts of ex-Fata, newly merged district, tribal regions especially. And findings highlight that not all individuals categorized as IDPs meet WFP's vulnerability criteria for inclusion and assistance. So a new targeting approach was introduced based on intersectionality that focus IDPs and categorize them into 2, off-camp IDPs and in-camp IDPs. And it considers all IDPs still residing in camps, heavily relying on WFP assistance. However, the case of off-campus IDPs, it mainly includes food insecure families with special focus on female-headed household and persons with disabilities and others. Later, around 16,000 IDPs families were assessed, of which who have been actually added by One Food Program, and
Dr. Shaheen, I guess she is disconnected.
Yes, she's.
Let me check with her.
Till the time Dr. Shaheen is reconnected, if any idea, any thought, any of the panelists may like to share just to fill the time gap, or if Sadia, you may like to share any relevant thought from your side. Because what Dr. Shaheen was discussing and sharing, it was, I think, very relevant and pertinent in the context of Pakistani society, and specifically the vulnerable communities in the rural areas and the urban slums as well. I think so. Or Sadia, you may take the next panelist, and she will continue maybe later on.
थैंक यू सो मच। मेरी डॉक्टर शाहीन से बात हुई, वो कनेक्ट कर रही हैं, तो हम लोग जब तक शी इज रिकनेक्टिंग, अदरवाइज हम किसी और पैनलिस्ट को रिक्वेस्ट कर देते अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन के लिए।
जी, बस 30 सेकंड देखें, अगर कनेक्ट हो जाती हैं तो ठीक है, अदरवाइज देन यू कैन टेक द नेक्स्ट पैनलिस्ट, एंड देन after the completion of the next panelist, then she will be requested to
she
continue.
did me on call, so she is connecting.
Okay, okay. So this is another challenge of the technological, I think, advancement and the gaps that once you are globally connected, and if there is gap, so let's move with this these challenges, this challenge as well. I think Sadia, please take the next panelist, and then Dr. Shaheen will continue after that.
Okay, sir. We have next with us Dr. Ayesha Nazuk. Dr. Ayesha Nazuk is statistician, currently working as assistant professor at NUST University, and she has presented her research work in national and international conferences. She's connected.
Yes,
Dr. Shaheen, I'm so sorry, Dr. Aisha, if you allow, so could she continue her presentation?
Yeah, it's perfectly all right.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you so much. Over to you, Shaheen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened, but so you have started another presentation.
No, Dr. Shaheen, she didn't start. You can continue your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Just let me share my screen with you people. Are you able to see it?
Yes, please continue. Thank you, Dr. Shaheen.
My apologies.
It is visible.
It is visible. Okay, right. Is it in slide mode, show?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was sharing the experiences of internally displaced population, and yeah, I was just talking about that around so this new targeting approach actually, which was introduced by WFP, focuses IDPs and categorizes them into off-camp IDPs and in-camp IDPs. Considers all IDPs still residing in camps, heavily relying on WFP for assistance. However, in off-camps, it mainly includes insecure families, food insecure families, with special focus on women, headed household, disabled, and others. Later, around 16,000 IDP families were assessed, who were aided by WFP for the last several years. And out of 16,000, around 9,000 families, 57% families were considered eligible for the assistance. Finally, this research reveals that integrating intersectional approaches can support in targeting the most marginalized section of society in humanitarian context. And it also highlights that the collection of data that can be disaggregated by sex, age, and disability is crucial for effective implementation of the response. And it may also be noted that inclusion errors, by which I mean non-eligible households still receiving assistance, and exclusion errors, eligible households not receiving assistance, may still occur in the design and implementation of the interventions. Now we understand that those intersectionality is becoming an established concept, but more field-based research needed for the highlighting particular context and how this can be useful, more useful indeed, and to apply in that humanitarian context. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaheen, for sorry. Again. Okay.
Yes, she
Thank you
has
so much.
done.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Shaheen, for your wonderful presentation and highlighting the vulnerable groups of due to COVID pandemic, and sharing with us that how WFP has launched different programs to help them. So now, without any further delay, let me introduce our next presenter, Dr. Ayesha Nazuk. Dr. Ayesha Nazuk is statistician and currently working as assistant professor at National University of Science and Technology. She has presented her research work at national and international conferences and has published 14 research papers in national and international journals. She holds a doctoral degree in statistics, and today she will be presenting the impact of COVID-19 on women of Pakistan, taking necessary steps towards recovery. So over to you, Dr. Aisha.
Thank you, Sadia. So once again, Assalamu alaikum everyone. And first of all, let me confirm that my screen is visible.
Yes, it is. Please, Dr. Aisha, continue.
Thank you. Okay, so before I, start my own presentation, I would like to add a small comment that when the first presenter, she was giving the presentation, I was sort of like, pleased that the things are interconnected in the panel. I'm sure that you have carefully designed it, but still it was sort of a childlike feeling of happiness when she was talking about the vulnerable groups. So my topic is, or my paper is relevant to the gender dimension in terms of the vulnerable groups. But of course, this is a holistic term, and it can include a lot of, type of vulnerabilities. So let's start the presentation formally. I think this will be sort of a very basic information, but still, for you can say maybe the icebreaker for the presentation. Everyone knows that COVID-19 has taken a toll on the socioeconomic landscape. And by the way, being a statistician, I would say that the importance of data has, been highlighted even more in this entire episode of pandemic. So the more the data we have, the more is the awareness about different type of vulnerabilities and different type of challenges that are being introduced by these type of structural breaks, such as the COVID-19. So this study summarizes the impact of COVID-19 on females, and so basically I'm going to discuss findings of two studies. Both were conducted under the umbrella of the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. In one of the studies, I was the principal investigator, and another study, which was running parallel, was conducted by Dr. Nasir Iqbal. So as I said that we'll be talking about different type of, not in this presentation, but when we talk about vulnerable groups, it doesn't, it's not limited just to the females, but currently we'll be focusing on the female. By the way, if we try to include the, holistic dimensions of the gender, there are so many other, shades to this whole construct, but we'll be limiting ourselves to what are the challenges being faced by the females. And with this, I would also like to add a note here that if we ever, highlight the issues faced by the females, this is without any, we're not agnostic to the fact that the males have their own challenges. If we analyze the global statistic, even the suicide rate that has been, higher, being the fact that in most of the cases, males are, the head of the households. So I'm not, in fact, no one is insensitive to the contribution of the males in this entire episode. But of course, when we are talking about a particular study, we always have some qualifiers or we limit our discussion. Anyhow, COVID-19, as if you talk in terms of number, that sort of a depressing statistic it is that the number of extreme poor in the world, which was earlier on predicted to be somewhere around 586 million, it has swelled to a good 735 million. I mean, and 60% of the extreme poor shall be living in the South Asia. You see, this in itself includes or envelops so many challenges. You know that when it's a very straightforward link, that when poverty increases, so does the crime rate, so does the dependency syndrome. So this situation is quite grave, and and the gravity of the situation is even higher for the females, especially in the cases where patriarchal dominance, further limits the growth opportunities for female. So coming to specifically to the case of Pakistan, as you know that roughly 71% of the females are self-employed in Pakistan, and most of them are predominant share is involved in the informal economy, which is even tougher to regulate. So that's a real challenge for both for the government as well as for the independent research organizations to for the government in terms of regulation and monitoring of this sector of the economy for the benefit of the females, and for the independent organization to create maximum amount of data that can highlight what are the specific challenges in this sector. So at least we want whenever there is some positive contribution from the government, we should always acknowledge that, because as we always say, too much negativity is also bad. So if we talk about the government's effort, so one such program is the Aisha's Emergency Cash Program that was launched in April 2021. But one issue is that, being included in the program is linked with ownership of a registered mobile SIM. I repeat, registered. And in most of the cases, the females, they tend to prefer the register the same with maybe their husband or brother because of, the cultural constraints here in Pakistan. Even the national identity card, females do have constraints, or there are some gender gaps even in that dimension as well. So there is a need to, come up to the plan, devise a plan that can specifically include the females that are currently excluded from this program. And we all know that this pandemic is not just one odd case in the history. If we analyze the global history of, pandemics, and, there are a lot of research papers streaming and flowing on the internet that the pandemics are going to continue. And that's an unfortunate fact, but that's how it is. So we need to, design plans to protect the vulnerable groups, and social safety nets must include gender dimensions of poverty. Okay, so as we said, that it's not only the sole responsibility of the government, but the independent think tanks, INGOs, NGOs, they also need to, play their part. So coming specifically to the National Poverty Graduation Program that was, initiated under the umbrella of Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. So I was, analyzing their audited progress report, and in some of the cases, some of the statistics were quite encouraging. For example, when they were forming some community institutions to eradicate poverty, 88% of the beneficiaries were females. Then when they were training the community resource persons for different type of trainings, the 86% beneficiaries were females. The case of tangible asset transfer, in that case, females are relatively, less benefited. To my humble understanding, it may be because of the fact that there are very few females who like to declare themselves as the head of the households, and asset transfer programs are generally linked with the status as a head of the household. So coming specifically to the two studies that I mentioned in the beginning, first study that I have conducted by Dr. Nasir Iqbal, it used a mixed match approach. So focus group discussions were conducted, as well as some KEIs, that is key informant interviews. So 45 FGDs were conducted, and it included both the male as well as the female, but we will be discussing the findings specifically for the female cohort. So they used the econometric model, and they classified the, or predicted the economic, or you can say the economy, in three different type of scenario, the pessimistic scenario, moderate, and the optimistic scenario. So you can see under the pessimistic scenario, the growth rate has a discouraging or negative number, and then under the moderate, it is 0.1%, and then optimistic scenario, the full economic recovery, GDP growth rate is 1.3%. So under these three different scenarios, they analyzed different type of variable. One of them was school dropouts. So you can see that there is sufficient variation in the predicted number of school dropout at a primary level. For example, if the economy undergoes at a full economic recovery, then almost the difference between the predicted dropout is, you can say, half of it. So, but when I was analyzing a dropout for the classes 6 to 8 and 9 to 10, you can see that these are sort of insensitive to what type of scenario the economy is undergoing through. So maybe it's a food for thought. Although the determinants of school dropout are quite many, and we can't, limit them just to the pandemic scenario. But of course, we need to design a plan that under the pandemic scenario, how we can, circumvent or minimize the school dropouts. Once again, I happen to author another paper in which we mentioned that school dropouts is not solely linked with one variable. Some of the parents, we all know, they intentionally don't want their child to be, enrolled in a school because they think that the earning opportunity otherwise are much higher. Anyhow, so these were the statistics. Moving to the impact on work opportunities, you can see that 54%, which is a significant number, 54% of the female reported that the COVID-19 has a great impact on their work opportunities. Even the moderate impact, that cannot be ignored. You can see it, even that's a sizable share, 15%. So 23% reported that there is no impact. The study didn't talk about what are the determinants or what are the profiling of those females who reported that there is no impact. Maybe that's a question for the further research. Then we move to COVID impact on income. You can see here even more share. 63% of the reported females reported that there is a great impact on their income, and that was on the negative side. That is, they reported that COVID-19 has decreased their earning opportunities. Even the other, as I said, the moderate impact, that's not ignorable. That's also a significant number. 17% have reported moderate impact. So if I try to summarize the findings of all FGDs, there were different type of dimensions, and most of them were related to, loss in terms of quality education. That is, COVID-19 has compromised the opportunities for quality education, employment opportunities, and loss of jobs, specifically for those females who are not, equipped with technological prowess to, upgrade their skill set in terms of, the world which is moving toward internet more and more. And the last one was mental health issues that are linked with the fact that females, they have to spend most of their time at home. And during the lockdown, you must have studied a lot of papers, even globally, that unfortunately, the domestic violence cases, even divorce rates and these type of social issues, they have increased specifically during lockdown. So this was about the FGDs from Punjab. Similar results were, noticed for KP and Sindh Union councils. So moving to the gender dimension of the second study, the data was created for 17 districts. I'm going to limit because of, the fact that profiling the 17 district in a shorter amount of time is quite challenging. So I'm presenting as a sample the case of Jang, Dijihan, and Laya. So if I talk about the work opportunities, I created, in terms of the labor laws of Pakistan, I created a dichotomy or a binary group, people who are working less than 9 hours and then who are working more than 9 hours. But I think here, instead of, viewing the whole situation as being lawful or unlawful, I think if we view the graph more with an angle of work opportunities. So you can see, as I said in the beginning, that more of the females, they are engaged in informal economy. So probably this is the reason that females have reported more work opportunities because as compared to male. So this is the case for Jang. Similar result could be noticed for the case of DG Khan as well. Whereas for the case of Laya, the results were sort of mixed, and we couldn't determine the impact of gender on working hours. Then an interesting statistic that the poverty score showed a significant association with gender. A high share of males reported lesser intensity of poverty, specifically during lockdown. So that means from here we find some qualified evidence that females have, have faced more loss in terms of undergoing more, in terms of experiencing higher magnitude or intensity of poverty. Then the last thing that we discussed was we dichotomized the monthly working days into two criteria, group. Those having more than 15 days monthly work days and those having less than 15 monthly work days. So here again, we can see that the females reported, this is for the case of Jam, that more better work options. But I'm again repeating that this penetration of female is more in informal economy. Even in the formal economy, the study cannot, we can't categorically declare that they have an edge because we need to, analyze so many other aspects if we have to declare that they are better in this time. How friendly is the workplace? What is the wage structure? These are sort of the dynamics that we cannot ignore. So similarly, the case of work opportunity for DG Khan, once again, you can see that the females reported a better work option, significantly higher than males. And so is the case for Laya. So moving towards the conclusion, first of all, as I said, that this is a challenge that we need to, join hands with government. We need to build resilient communities. We need to shun and circumvent dependency syndromes. Because even during the pandemic, I always say that whenever there is a social safety net, it should also have some way of monitoring that whenever some assets or some financial benefit is transferred, there should be some, surety mechanism that ensures that the people who are taking the benefit, they are not converting into people who have dependency syndrome, who is expecting in the long run that they will keep on getting the benefits. So with this, I conclude, and I thank you for giving me time to present my research findings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aisha, for your wonderful presentation. If you have any questions, you can write in Zoom chat box. Then we will answer you in the end of the session. So now we have our next presenter, Dr. Mohsin Kazmi, Associate Research Fellow at SDPI, and currently he's heading a UNDP project at SDPI. He has produced a lot of research papers on statistics that have been published in national and international impact factor journals. In addition, he is a visiting faculty member of School of Business Management, Schools of Politics and International Relation, and Department of Statistics at Quaid-e-Azam University. Today, he will be presenting his study on affection financial literacy of women entrepreneurship of informal sector in COVID-19, a case study from Pakistan. So over to you, Dr. Kazmi.
Thank you very much, Sadia, for inviting me about this is very important discussion. And I would like to thank Shahid Saib as well, who encouraged me to present my work here. So I would like to start from here as Mr. Kemal and Dr. Aisha and Dr. Shaheen said that COVID pandemic has become a worldwide disaster. So this pandemic actually has not only nearly affected the world economy, but also so family economy, especially women entrepreneur of the informal sector. So in this presentation, I would like to present actually my case study related to the financial literacy to cover the economic section of this session. So we are basically financial literacy of how financial literacy is related to the women who are working actually in informal sector. So because good financial literacy will help individual to avoid financial problems, especially during to the COVID pandemic. It has a favorable impact on the economic growth, because it helps individual to save, be knowledgeable about the different financial products available, while having the courage to demand products that satisfies their needs. So this study is basically conducted in the 5 districts of Punjab, where we interviewed almost 500 female respondents who are engaged in different enterprises. So why we have considered financial literacy is basically the idea behind is that we actually want to know that how women's keeping the accounting books which are related to their enterprises, for instance, sale books, purchase books, expense books, and also so how many of the women have understanding about the terminologies like saving, loan, investment, collateral, taxes, insurances, and tax rate, inflation rate, and many other things. So overall objective of this study is to actually investigate the factor affecting financial literacy of the women in Pakistan, and also so to determine which of the factor has a significant effect on the financial literacy. So if actually, every social scientist has its own definition of entrepreneurship. For instance, in according to my opinion, entrepreneurship is not just about running a business. It is a whole process of finding adequate resources to capitalize on the opportunity that ultimately leads to the creation of the sustainable value and reward. So if we look at the informal enterprises, similarly, it is basically defined as a small, unregistered, and private and uncorporated enterprises. So the women, entrepreneurs, and informal sectors, if we combine together, then it contributes to the economic development in terms of job creation as well, and economic growth as well. So the overall methodology is, next slide, please. Here you can see that we try to cover up the whole Punjab in terms of one district. We have selected one district from the Upper Punjab and 2 districts from the Central Punjab and Southern Punjab as well, to get ideas how to actually compare how the women who are living in these 3 regions, how they work, and how the pandemic affect on the financial literacy and their enterprises. So here you can see the Multan, Sheikhupura, Bahawal Nagar, Faisalabad, Sargodha, and Rawalpindi. These are the 5 districts in which we have conducted this study. Next slide, please. So these are the descriptive statistics. You can see that almost 55% to 59% of the survey responded across the districts were financial literate. The overall descriptive statistics of the 5 districts Punjab indicates that the mean value of the responded financial literacy is 61%. That clearly indicate the higher number of the sample that are financial literate actually. So it is also observed that 53% of the respondent have received marketing related training. The average age of the respondent was approximately 34 year. The average completed year of business was reported to be around 10 and a half years. So most of the respondents were well, almost equally divided between the if we look at their educational status, then most of them almost equally divided to the metric, intermediate, and graduation level of the students were responded, whereas the 5% reported to have only received the primary education, which is quite alarming, and so many other things. So these are basically the geographical status, and also you can see the factors which we have considered that are affecting directly as well as indirectly the financial literacy. So we would try to imply a logistic regression in where we have considered financial literacy as a dependent variable, and geographical status, and the factors which are affecting the financial literacy as considered as a independent variable. Here you can see the highlighted variable are significant variables which are actually significantly affecting the financial literacy. Next slide, please. If we look at the odd ratios of the research, where you can see that out of 17 variables, 10 variables are significantly affecting the financial literacy, and you clearly you can see that the education, as education increases, the chance of being financial literate significantly also increases. The odd ratio of being financial literate are 1.202 times higher for the women who have gained formal education as compared to the women who don't have the formal education. Similarly, chance of being financial literate are 2 times higher for the women who have access to the credit as compared to the women who don't. If we look at similarly, if we look at the business type of business, you can see that a business facility also increases the chance of being financial literate. The odds of being financial literate is 1.3 times higher for the women who have a business facility as compared to the women who don't have. If we compare the social acceptance of their business, then you can clearly see that it's the odds of financial literate by 1 time as who have social acceptance of their business higher than those who don't have their social acceptance. These are those factors who are actually whose odd values are more than 1, and other significant factor. If we on the behalf of odd ratios, they are significantly affecting the financial literacy, but due to their less value of odd ratio, then we can't say that they contribute as those variables who have greater than 1. So on the behalf of next slide, please. On the behalf of these research, so we can say that recommendations are as follows to enhance the financial literacy among the women in Pakistan. First one is that public and private sector should focus on the formal education of the women, as it enhances the chances of financial literacy. Because as according to our research, we can say that education is significantly affecting the financial literacy. Women who have education more than primary education are more financially literate as compared to those who have less than the primary education. So that's why we can say that. If government should also introduce mechanism to incentivize and register all the informal enterprises. The idea basically behind this is that if government registered these informal enterprises, then government can analyze how can illiterate those women in different way, and also give to help them to enhance their business as well. Similarly, the State Bank of Pakistan should introduce small and micro enterprises funding facility, especially for the women entrepreneur, like it is being followed in India. India has made it compulsory for the bank to fix 60% of their advances for the SMEs. Government should focus more on providing business facilities to start up and small entrepreneurs. This setup will not only help increase financial literacy among the women entrepreneur, but also boost Pakistan ranking in ease of doing business. Similarly, we can say that government should ensure the implementation of laws to make a friendly and suitable business environment for the women who are working in the informal sector. Private organization and NGOs should also focus on providing marketing training to women entrepreneurs. This will help boost their business as well as their financial literacy. So these are points from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kazmi. We have some questions for you, but we will taking in last. Now, without any further delay, I welcome to my next panelist, Dr. Shahla Tabassum. Dr. Shahla is head of department of gender studies and at Fatma Jinnah Women University, Rawalpindi, Pakistan. She is an established author and gender expert with more than 20 years of relevant experience. So now she's presenting today very interesting study of single motherhood inflicted by increased widowhood and divorce amid COVID pandemic, recommendations to reduce women's vulnerability. So over to you, Dr. Shahla.
Thank you very much, Sadia, for the kind words, and greetings to everyone. The study, I'll sharing my screen with you. My study is based on, as Sadia mentioned, is on single motherhood. That study not only shed light on the vulnerabilities of single mothers that were divorced and widowhood during this pandemic time, but it also offers some of the recommendations. Before starting the introduction, I just wanted to share to you that this study started with our own experiences as single mothers, as widow and divorced, Nashia and me, during this pandemic. So while we were going into the discussions of these vulnerabilities, we were in conversations, then we later going through the literature, and we come to know that this pandemic has not only affected the life, but it is also reduced the life expectancy of men and women, and that is differently with both men and women. And the results, that statistics that previously my fellow researchers had shown, that men were more prone to death as compared to women. And these later these statistics were confirmed by other researchers from the rest of the world, as men were more vulnerable to death. So during this pandemic, so there was a more rise of widowhood. So at the same time, the lockdown that my previous researchers, Dr. Aisha mentioned, that has increased the divorce rate that that give us the question in our minds that set the foundation of our research. And that question was how the coronavirus pandemic has inflicted single motherhood as a result of an increased surge of widowhood and divorce, and how has becoming a single mother during the pandemic increased women's vulnerability in Pakistan. They are not only the women, but also the widows and then single mothers, and what lessons we have learned from those, and that can be reduced to women's vulnerabilities. So that basically to lead us to understand the theories of vulnerabilities, and to find the answer of that, we go for the theories of vulnerability. And the traditional theory that was saying that vulnerability is universal, constant, and dependent. And the role of government is very important in formulating the social policies and social welfare interventions in designing that. But what we saw that this theory was not able to address in allocating resources to specific vulnerabilities related to the populations who are specifically vulnerable. But at the same time, the positive thing was that this theory did not stop government to make specific social policy interventions. That where we took our position, and that is our feminist position, that vulnerability is relational and it is constituted, and that is interdependent. So government can target those specific vulnerabilities with a caution to move beyond the stereotypes that my fellow researchers have mentioned previously, and pre-assumption about who is and who is not vulnerable. We have to be very careful when we have to make these interventions and make those designing those interventions or policies. And this must be based on the understanding and evidence about needs and risk of vulnerability populations that my previous researchers have shown that through their researches, the evidences are there. So drawing this clarity taken from the theory, so we designed our methodology. Basically, that was not the quantitative, because we have seen so many women who were widowed and divorced, but they were not able to share their experiences due to the stigma that was attached to that. So only 6 women were willing to share their experiences, so who were widowed and divorced during this period. So the women who were selected, that was through snowball sampling techniques. So they don't want to share anything to anyone. So these were from Karachi, Lahore, and Rawalpindi. And the interviews were taken either via telephonic conferencing or to face-to-face between the period of January to July 2021. All those women had children before the pandemic, and 4 were the widows and 2 divorced, and their age ranges from 30 years to 55 years, and their education even ranged from primary to PhD, but that did not allow them to, they were not to be vulnerable. All the women, irrespective of their age or education or their location, they all were vulnerable. So based on this information that these 6 women, through their in-depth interviews provided, the data emerged different themes. And one of the theme was breakdown of the traditional security network. And these security network, when they were in their family way, so they thought they were safe and secure, but now being as single, they felt insecure and they reported lack of trust in their social network. And being lonely mothers, they suffer the fear of being alone, and that as a result of that, they lost their self-esteem and they lost their self-confidence. And into that, they lost their personal contacts and they withdraw the socially interaction that also increases their vulnerability. Yes, they said that they are safe in their immediate family members, their daughters, their sons, or some said their friends and colleagues, they are their primary security network. Otherwise, when they are alone, they feel unsecure and unsafe in their families, in the public, at home, everywhere. So second theme that emerged from that data, that is the economic vulnerability that is coming through this single motherhood. That is evident from when they are saying that they were housing and food securities, food crisis during that time. They feel insecure. The participants living in rented house mentioned that the rent burden makes them economically disadvantaged and therefore increasing their vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities of their children by pushing them more into the wheel of poverty. Participant also mentioned that and my previous researchers also mentioned to their research that the taking care of the children at home that take away from them the opportunity of working to earn for their family, being single mothers. And as widows and divorced, participant also mentioned some of them that they are receiving childcare support from their immediate family members, but mostly there was no support. So they were further vulnerable to poor economic conditions. The third theme that emerged from this data, that was the health vulnerabilities. The mothers who became single mothers during this pandemic became 10 times more vulnerable to physical and mental health related problems, and their newly changed social status, the stigma attached with that, and the iddat and mobility restrictions during iddat increases their vulnerability to health-related issues. Their economic vulnerability also take away the privilege of affording good health care for themselves and their children, therefore that increases their vulnerabilities. These were the three major themes that emerged, and based on these three themes, we recommended some of the policy and practices recommendation to look into that. One is that to build safety network for single mothers through making connections between the women at risk initially. All the women who are at risk, they must connect with each other, and then strengthening through success stories of single mothers who maintain their agency. So it can be the way to build the safety network. And the initial income support or public work opportunity to increase women's paid work in the specific context of Pakistan. As my previous researchers have mentioned, the economic and public work opportunities, they have lost, so they need to involve them in that paid work. Helping women who owned small businesses to establish their business. As one of the participants started her own small business after taking divorced. And the last recommendation that we are suggesting, offering, that is single mother health cards that help them to get health related benefits. So at the end, the present research is very limited, but it has highlighted the that the coronavirus pandemic has inflicted single motherhood as a result of an increased surge of widowhood and divorce, and becoming a single mother during the pandemic has increased women's social, economic, and health related vulnerabilities in Pakistan. This can be reduced by offering paid work opportunities, single mother health cards, and building social networks. Thank you. That's from my side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaila, for your wonderful presentation. As we are running out of time, we have our next presenter, Dr. Saeeda Khan. She's in PhD in Gender Studies from University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. Her research interest lies in area of gender-based violence, development, education, and Pashtun culture. She was IDRC SDPI Research Fellow for Governance, Security, and Justice in South Asia 2013. Today she's presenting her study on domestic violence towards female domestic workers during COVID pandemic in Peshawar, Pakistan. So we have to play your video, Saida, or you would be available.
Hello. Yeah,
Saida.
Sadia, thank you so very much for introducing me. I'll prefer to play my video.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay?
Yes, it will be totally
okay. So I'll go mute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good day everyone. I'm Saeeda Khan, PhD in Gender Studies from University of Malaya. Today I'm sharing my recent work on domestic violence towards female domestic workers during COVID-19 pandemic in Peshawar. According to a Domestic Workers Convention of ILO, the term domestic work means work performed in or for a household. And the term domestic workers mean any person engaged in domestic work within an employment relationship. In Pakistan, there are more than 8.5 billion domestic workers, yet it is a largely an unknown occupation, among which the majority is of female domestic workers. They are usually known as Kamwali, Masi, Babo, and Aya in the local context. These women are commonly engaged in cooking, cleaning, taking care of children, the elderly and disabled, attend to the garden and pets. But in parallel, the female domestic workers provide financial security to their families, which makes them empowered as well. But unfortunately, the COVID-19 lockdown made millions of such workers unemployed all around the globe. There are evidences from South Asia, Brazil, Africa, and many other countries. Most of the recent literature in this context discusses the issues faced by the migrant domestic workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. A little has been done on the domestic violence against the domestic female workers in Pakistan. So in this study, I have utilized the definitions of domestic violence employed in Australia's National Action Plan for Reducing Violence Against Women and Children. It is any act of violence that occur between people who have or have had an intimate relationship that includes physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological abuse. The impact of coronavirus is seen differently on different genders, whereas women from the informal sector are adversely affected in Pakistan. Thus, in this study, I am looking into the domestic violence and COVID-19 pandemic faced by the female domestic workers in Peshawar. It argues that female domestic workers' experience of domestic violence must be understood within the context of their individual position at the family, social, and state level. This research was conducted in Peshawar. It is the capital city of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. As I was living in Peshawar during the fieldwork, it was not possible to reach the other cities due to the COVID-19 situation. And the data for this study is collected directly from the primary sources during February 2021 until April 2021. The total sample of this study is 23 female domestic workers who were living and working at Peshawar, and these women were working as domestic workers even before COVID-19 pandemic. During the data collection process, COVID-19 SOPs were strictly followed. The study is exploratory. It is an appropriate design for this study as the topic of domestic violence is very sensitive in the context of Pakistan and particularly in Peshawar. In this study, I am exploring the living experiences of domestic violence among domestic female workers, which depend on the qualitative method. Sampling technique used for the data collection is non-probabilistic, and further I selected purposive sampling as a sampling framework in this study, which is commonly used in social research for interviewing methods when a particular group of people is targeted. Prior to data collection, interview guides were prepared for each category of the sample along with information sheet and consent form. Most of the interviews were conducted in Pashto and Urdu language that was transcribed and translated for analysis. For data analysis, Clark and Brown's 6-step thematic analysis was used. The study finds that the outbreak of novel coronavirus impacted the lives of female domestic workers gravely. The presence of anxiety, stress, and fear was evident among the narrations of the sample women due to the outbreak and the subsequent lockdown. The interviews with the sample women best exemplifies how COVID-19 pandemic resulted in economic distress. Due to nationwide lockdown, they were locked in their home without salaries and without any financial support. Their ability of losing household income generation pushed them to the boundaries where they lost their power in the familial hierarchy. Along with it, the study also finds that since women are at home, they were overburdened by the domestic work that of course sometimes resulted in arguments and fight with the husband and other family members such as siblings, parents, and in-laws. Also, as all the male members were staying at home and may have argument with each other, that usually ended up in physical and non-physical violence, giving psychological stress to the female family members. Further, for women who are married, lockdown was problematic as they were forced to have sexual intercourse with their husband more often. It has resulted in unplanned pregnancies. Majority of the women mentioned that they were subjected to physical violence more frequently during the lockdown. It was also mentioned that as the women were unemployed and were not even provided by sufficient financial support by their owners, their bodies become a burden over their family, and to transfer the burden to other, the unmarried women were forcefully married or engaged by their male family members. It also shows that women lost their position in the family and social setup due to COVID-19 that added indirectly to losing their agency and empowerment and made them more vulnerable to domestic violence. As one of the participants said, my own parents and siblings are not involving me in any personal matter because I am not bringing home any money. I pray the world become normal so women like us start working again and regain our positions. The findings of this study conclude that domestic violence subsequently increase after a catastrophic event. Women, if earning, has a lower chance of being subjected to domestic violence. COVID-19 pandemic lockdown adversely affected these women's position in their familial setup, and they lost their empowerment. The global pandemic scenario and the subsequent vulnerabilities have aggravated and reinforced the social, cultural, and economic inequalities surrounding women engaged in informal sector. It is true that the pandemic has resulted in emergence of new forms of rights violation and situation of social injustice among the informal workforce, characterized by termination of jobs, non-payments of wages or salaries, workload, health risks, poor access to health care, violence, stigmatization and humiliation, unmet food, health and education requirements of the family, so that what must be done? Recognize the female domestic workers, Immediate attention must be provided to the labor rights of female domestic workers to address their emotional, psychological, social, and economic well-being needs. Implement national level policy and state-supported assistance schemes specifically targeting female domestic workers to support them during state of emergencies, ensuring their social security and welfare. Collaboration should be done with local or district government, community-based organizations, NGOs, and law enforcement agencies to disseminate factual health information about COVID-19 spread and creating platform to address domestic violence. Men must be actively involved in this process and they must be trained. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can write in question answer box. So as we didn't get any question yet, so may I please request to Mr. Ali Kemal for your concluding remarks.
Dear Sadia, there is one question in the chat box. You can check it.
There is any question answer? Okay.
Yes, it is addressed to Mohsin Kazmi, and if Mohsin Kazmi, if you can respond to that question very quickly.
Thank you, Shah Sab. Actually, and this is very interesting point which have raised by Dr. Aisha, and I send a message to Dr. Aisha as well. I will try to analyze those variables in my study, and will share the results with Dr. Aisha as well for further suggestions to refine my work.
Till the time Mr. Ali Kemal join us for his concluding remarks, let me share and let me appreciate Sadia for conducting this panel very excellently, and my deep gratitude to all the panelists from SDPI, specifically Dr. Saeeda Khan. You presented in such an excellent manner. It reflects that you rehearsal a lot while preparing your presentation, and the way you presented, I must appreciate that I have learned it very first time to present research in that way. Secondly, I must appreciate all the panelists, Dr. Aisha Khan, for going and collecting data from those areas which are very remote. DG Khan and Jhang is my district as well, and I can understand the challenges that that one can face to collect the data, and the challenges that the people who are living there they have. I must appreciate Dr. Shahla Tabassum for analyzing the challenges of the women and the widows and those who are divorced, and collecting data is itself has some grief and some sorrows, and the way to talk to them is really a challenge. And we appreciate Dr. Shala, you and your colleague for collecting that data and presenting in a very graceful manner. Dr. Shaheen, Ashraf, excellent presentation, and the way you started with a very smart opening video. I think this is another powerful sort of presentation that you presented, and you shared the valuable thoughts and the data that you have. I also would like to thank to Dr. Mohsen Kazmi, and he's my colleague, and I learned a great deal from him in terms of data analysis, because he's a trainer as well, and the way he collected the data and presented the data. Thank you, Dr. Kazmi. Wonderful presentation. And overall, what I would like to share that all these data and information has been collected by all the panelists from different places, but they have some similarities, some overlapping, which really reflects that So things are interconnected. The women and the people, and they have sort of similar challenges in either part of the world, particularly in the Asian countries and specifically the developing countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all that. And so this is, I think that so the synergies could be made. And if I may request to Sadia to engage all these panelists after this panel to share their knowledge and maybe building a very powerful collective study, and that can be produced in a small booklet to share the these experiences and these challenges for the larger people and the larger audience to get benefit out of these researches that has been produced by all of you. Thank you so much. Please check if Dr.
Thank you
Ayesha
so
is
much,
there.
Shahid Saab. Actually, Dr. Ali Kamal is in travel and he is living in Marriott. He's not, maybe he's
Oh,
disconnected somehow. So we have
might
another question from Mohsin Kazmi. Sir, you can see in question answer session section and respond this. So, sir, Shahid Saab, if we couldn't connect to Dr. Ali Kamal, sorry, so you can conclude this session.
okay. Let's have a question response from Dr. Mohsin, and then we can move further.
Sure.
Uh, yes, Fatima, it's very interesting question. Digital literacy is really a very big challenge, especially during the pandemic, because as you know, students who are learning at school during the pandemic, it's a very difficult challenge, not only for them. So if we government especially introduce digital literacy, so it will not only help but also so give them a new dimension in our country. That's all. Thank you.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohsen. And I think I'm not the appropriate person to remarks on such wonderful presentations. But what I have learned, what I have listened during this 1.5 hour, so I must appreciate all the panelists, the information which has been shared, the data which has been shared by Dr. Shaheen Ashraf. I think was very much relevant, and it actually touches the ground realities across the countries. And when Dr. Shaheen was disconnected, I was just sharing that. So there are so much similarities within the regional countries, and particularly from the Pakistan perspective as well. And thank you so much, Dr. Shaheen, for highlighting those points and challenges that women are facing, and those are the vulnerable community of these countries. I must appreciate Dr. Aisha. You are, I must say, you are a gem. You collected data, as I have already mentioned, and then you presented in a very powerful manner. And I think this data which you have shared and the question you have raised to Dr. Kazmi, I think itself reflect that there are potential of having joint venture with the SDPI with Dr. Kazmi, and you can further go on this study. And thank you so much for presenting this. Uh, Dr. Shahla, I have already mentioned that you are, I mean, you yourself is an institution for the last 20 years, even more than that. You've been engaged in such challenges. And when we say women vulnerability, it is not so simple, because it has pain and it has grief, because mother is the central point for any family, for any home. And if this is shaked, so the entire building of that family is actually collapsed. Mother is that strong pillar within the families, which are holding not only the family structure, but also managing the spouse, and also managing the different kids, also managing the other semicircle, including the in-laws, relatives, and all that. And that's why it is said that the man is given power to work outside, and the homes and the families are strengthened only with the mothers and with the women's. And that you have actually raised during your presentation, and it was very touchy, and I was listening very carefully. Mohsen Kazmi, you presented, as I mentioned, I myself witnessed that you are a gem and you are producing such wonderful analysis of anything. And I'm so happy that you focused, you have this lens of thinking and visualizing the women perspective and the women entrepreneurship and those challenges. And the way you presented, excellent. Thank you so much. Hats off. Last but not the least, Dr. Saeeda Khan, I'm really impressed. I can understand that how long efforts that you had put into this presentation, and the data which has been collected and the data which has been prepared and analyzed. The most importantly, because I have my background as the training component, the most importantly that you have presented it in such a powerful manner that everything was so clear for even a layman, even a person who is not having that information, but you presented it very well. So all this synergies which has been built during this particular panel, during this session, is excellent. Last but not the least, I must appreciate my colleague Sadia, Satti, because she has been gone through such challenges, and she has been picked this subject, women and gender studies, by her choice, and she proved that she is an emerging leader, an emerging voice of the women. And thank you so much, Sadia, for organizing this panel, for conducting this panel, for moderating this panel. Thank you so much from my side. And I'm really honored to be part of this panel. Thank you from SDPI, and stay blessed.
Thank you so much, everyone, and my esteemed panelists to join this session and making this successful. Dr. Aisha has shared her WhatsApp and email address with everyone. Or also, I can connect you on if you would allow me to make a WhatsApp group where I can add all of the panelists for further discussion.
Yes, please.
I think
That
that's
would be
wonderful
great.
idea.
That would be great. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, Allah Hafiz.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Allah
Khuda
Hafiz.
Hafiz.
Yes, Allah Hafiz.